welcoming our very own, the one and only Anna Laskey back to the show. Anna, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So Anna sent me a Slack message I couldn't resist. I'm going to read it to you. It said, want to do a podcast episode about how I just fired a client for the first time ever. And I said, 10,000%. Here we are. And that's all I know. Okay. So what happened?
So the reason maybe I'll just give you context of like the reason I thought this would be an interesting conversation, because when I was a 90-day pipeline client, like, I don't know, a million years ago, it feels like it was like 5 years ago. One of the things you said to me was like, you can't have all these people as your clients. Like, you got to choose what you're known for. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't take that advice certain ways for the next 5 years. But I am really, 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 as an individual, making a lot of progress on that. And I finally hit like the perfect storm situation where I, in retrospect, now understand, and we'll talk about like how I now understand it, like why I shouldn't have said yes. But I also made the decision in the middle to say no. And that is like huge for me and hard for me because I love to say yes, and I love to help people, and I love to do my work of all different kinds for people who maybe I shouldn't be. So I thought you would be interested in this.
Let's dig in. So is this an old client that you've been working with for a while? Okay.
No.
All right. Tell the story.
So a while back, someone who I have worked with many times, he runs his own professional services firm. He reached out to me and he said, hey, I'm about to start working with a new client, and I want to work with them in a way that brings you in, and I want you to work with them on this very specific campaign that they're trying to build for their marketing. And I was like, oh, I've worked with this other gentleman literally almost 100 times over the course of my career. If he says, go for it, I'm going to go for it. I didn't think at all about it. And I just got on the call with the prospective client. I had some questions at first, but again, I'm relying on like, I've worked with this guy, like this type of work is easy for me. I'm doing it. I've done it 100 times. Let me just, address their lack of knowledge on the subject matter that I do. And, I'll just kind of make it work. Right. Was my approach. There were a number of sort of red flags for me that I ignored in retrospect. One of which was they were super, super wound up about their budget, and their maximum that they had available to spend was below what I had previously told myself was my minimum deal size. I was like, I got to have limits. Like, I can't go below this number, even if there's margin. Like, it doesn't make sense to go below this number. But again, without my friend even pressuring me at all, this was all internal to me. I was like, yeah, but like, I've worked with this guy before. Like, what could go wrong? Like, it'll be fun. Like, we'll make an exception. Right. So I kind of went down this path, and what proved to be true is that the reason I have this minimum deal size is because clients who are obsessed with being below it, or they have a lot of constraint, it causes me to have to compromise some of the way that I do my work. And it causes me to have to pull back on some of the things that I feel are really necessary. But those clients don't have usually enough knowledge of the type of work I do to see that as an issue. They're like, oh, no worries. Like, just do crappy work, Anna. And it's a problem, not just from like my ethics and wanting to do a great job, but it's also a problem because in market research, we have standards, this thing called ESMR standards, where we have a commitment as market researchers to make sure that our work passes certain compliance standards, so that when any of us reads a news article that has a statistic in it, we can all feel really confident that that's not just like a made up thing, and that there's data quality and integrity behind it. And in the work with this client, there were a lot of stakeholder issues that the very small dollar margin I was making on the job were not going to, make up for that time. And then two, I just kept being asked to compromise the work further. So I ended up writing them a survey, and then refunding them in full after writing the survey and saying, I'm good. You guys are all set.
So I want to dig into a couple of things here.
Yeah.
I want to, first of all, really understand the red flags.
Yeah.
And what I heard from you was a few things. I heard that there's this preoccupation with the budget, and everybody to some extent is worried about the budget, but this seemed to be a little bit over the top in a way that was compromising to your work.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's this ethical moral issue. And I think there's the standards that you need to meet, but also there's like your own moral compass around there's a right way and a wrong way to do the work. And their constraints were not allowing you to do it the right way. Is that the
Yeah.
case?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the sales process, I repeatedly explained to them, like, this is ideally the right way to do it. And the investment is, up here. And the way you want to do it, this is for the investment that you can make according to your very tight budget. We're going to have to make these trade-offs. And I was very, very explicit with them about the trade-offs. But typically in client conversations like that, like if my client is knowledgeable enough about the topic of marketing, frankly, they will look at those trade-offs and have the marketing knowledge and strategic knowledge as a marketer to say, oh, we shouldn't compromise on that. Like it almost usually is like a tool for me of like, where you need to be is up here, where you want to be is down here, here's the trade-offs. And that didn't land at all. They just said, okay, well, just like, yeah, we'll just compromise. And I'm like, so you're not going to get the full outcome that you're looking for. You acknowledge that. And I put that in writing in the proposal, and it turns out they just wanted to sign the deal. And then that same stakeholder, actually in the middle of the project, I mentioned stakeholder issues, came back and tried to say that, I had said all these things that were in conflict with that I was going to do all these things as part of the scope of work. And that was not the case.
So was that their lack of sophistication, right? They clearly were not sophisticated enough in terms of their marketing knowledge, understanding to see the compromise that was being made. Was that lack of sophistication a red flag that you should have noticed, you think?
Yeah. In retrospect, I think for this particular service that I sold, I need my clients to have a foundational level of experience with the methodology that I'm selling and the way that I'm working. I falsely equated my colleague's level of experience with him being an outside firm that this other company had hired. I almost like switched it in my brain where I'm like, oh, if he knows he has the depth of experience, I don't need to vet the client for that level of experience. And in other prospective client relationships that leads that I get, I usually don't even get on the phone with people like that because I ask them questions over email. Have you ever done this type of project before? Where did you come up with the idea for it? Right? Like I'm trying to vet that. In this case, I think a big learning for me was a referral doesn't mean that it's like a go. And I had almost like a green flag on everything because it was a referral from someone I've worked with a lot.
You felt comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Like you learned this lesson the hard way. And obviously you were putting a lot of faith in the referral, as I'm sure they were, to overlook some of these things. But something that's not discussed often enough is the moral obligation the consultant has to make sure the client actually truly understands the decisions that they're making and the compromises they're making, right? It's kind of like, your doctor has a moral responsibility to understand the procedure and the risks and the consequences, and ultimately the decision lies with you, but they have to educate you. And I imagine consultants don't do enough of that. They just try to get the deal signed, which is not what you were doing necessarily, but most do, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I would say like, again, I kind of simplified it in the story, but the reason I decided to step away from the deal was because I had written this survey. I had already gone as bare bones as I could on that moral and ethical basis while still keeping my integrity. And the ask from the client was for no additional budget. Can we make this a multi-country, multi-language study? And all this technical stuff I could tell you, but it was basically like, can you compromise everything integrity wise in order to get this over the finish line for us? And it was a very victim, woe is me, like you have to help me kind of framing. And so I literally said to them, like, because I have to stay in integrity. Like, that's one of the biggest things I've learned as a person is like always stay in integrity and you never have to worry about anything really at the end of the day. And I said, well, if your issue is really about getting it from the phase we're in now to the finish line, and what I've already told you and other people involved in this have told you is you need money to help you with that, I'm going to help you get some money. I'm going to give you a refund and I'm going to walk away from the deal so that you have the money to do this right. And that was truly my point of view and my framing to them. And I think that was shocking for everyone involved because I just was like really truly staying in integrity around this.
It's interesting. We talk about in 90-day pipeline, we talk a lot about this notion of preeminence and doing what's best for the client, which requires you to not have any kind of attachment to the deal, because sometimes what's best for the client is what is bad for you. And you kind of took that to an extreme and actually gave them their money back, which in a consulting context is unheard of.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what changed? If that was harder for Anna 5 years ago to do, what was the shift? What changed? What enabled that?
I have progressively been working on and getting more comfortable in doing what I feel is disappointing other people in order to protect my integrity, my sanity, my peace. And this was so hard for me. I mean, this was like the hardest email I've had to write, if you will. The emotional side of it was very difficult, but in doing it, guess how many deals I got out of firing a client?
How many?
I got 2 deals on the board, big ones, from other people who were involved in this engagement with the client, other firms. They said, "Wow, like didn't expect that, but like I'd love to work with you." And so it just proved to me that inner work I'm doing to always take a stand for what's right, it actually will lead to a better outcome over time. Even if I think people are going to hate me, and one person definitely does, but that's okay. Other people who see that are actually looking to that as leadership, and they're getting more confidence in their own life to do similar things, if that makes sense.
Do they hate you?
The specific client,
Yeah.
well, based on the last communications, I don't think I'm their favorite person, but
You gave them their money back. What's to be upset about?
Ahmed, like attachment is a really difficult
You broke up with them. That's why.
concept. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So what have you learned?
I have learned that if you set criteria for yourself in terms of like, what is your minimum deal size, or what is your ideal sort of client or whatever, you've got to vet every single deal, even if it's a referral, through that lens, and you can't compromise. And like for me, like I think I've been honest about this or been transparent about this on the podcast before. The last few years, I used to work with growth stage venture capital backed startups, and that market disappeared overnight, basically a few years ago. And so revenue for me has been, I feel like, beggars can't be choosers was how I felt a few years ago, right? Just being honest. And that mindset of like, I just need to drive some revenue so that I can like have money to live as a person, that almost superseded in this situation unconsciously the idea that I need to stick with my minimums. I need to stick with my criteria. I need to vet every deal, even if it's a referral, through this lens.
Do you feel like I need revenue at all costs, regardless of my standards? Do you feel like there's seasons in which that has to be the case, or is it a mistake at any time?
So I think specifically revenue at all costs, regardless of standards, like I will not compromise on my standards. I think in this situation, I didn't vet the deal early enough to see that the risk of having to compromise or being asked to compromise was really high. I just pursued it because I was in this like one track revenue kind of mindset. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and once you realized that your standards were being compromised, you found the nearest exit.
Yeah, for sure.
So the big take home message here today is standards, right? What you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your integrity, both in terms of, by the sound of it, how you do the work and what's right for the client. Like it's your moral obligation towards the client to do right by them. And if you can't do right by them because of the way the project is set up, whether that's budget or them holding up their end of the bargain or some other factor that might disrupt the work, if you can't truly do right by the client, then I mean, really your moral obligation is to walk away.
Yeah.
And standards in terms of how you're willing to be treated and how they engage with you as well.
Absolutely. And I think like I would say absolutely. And it's like having those minimum standards, but then also having reflected on this for a few weeks now, I've also started to get even more clear on what are my ideal standards. So beyond minimum standards that I have to meet, how could I learn from this even more and say, what are the ideal standards and have, and this is a concept in the book Essentialism, if anyone's read it, like I have to meet all of my minimum standards, but also what are my ideal standards for the type of clients I work with, for the type of projects that I do, for the types of clients in terms of their personality, disposition, level of experience, level of engagement, et cetera. What are the ideal standards for that? And I literally like yesterday wrote out a document that's called like the Essentialism Deal Filtration Rubric, because I'm like, I'm going to meet at least 2 out of 3 or 2/3 of the ideal standards, not just the minimums, because I went down this path. I learned the lesson. I'm not going to make this mistake again.
It's funny. Your role in 90-day pipeline is to coach clients through the ideal client target market selection phase. And and you'll comment on this better than I can, but I imagine a lot of people think in terms of, well, who will give me money?
Yeah.
My ideal client is the one that'll give me money. How often are people thinking about the kind of qualities that they want to see in the client that meet their standards?
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, it's interesting. And sometimes we have folks in the 90-day pipeline community posting about like clients being super late on invoices or, these predicaments that they end up in with clients legally and whatnot. And I'm not in any way blaming those clients, but throughout my 9 years of running this business, I can tell you that I have really just tried to learn anytime that something like that has happened. It's not just about, oh, that happens in business. It's about what are the personality traits or the way of showing up that I need my clients to have and what's their persona, right? And that's been hugely, hugely influential on how I market my services to a broad target market, right? Like if I say, oh, like I work with startups and growing companies to help them, evolve their next, 10x of growth or whatever, some jargony thing that I could make up on the spot, right? Like I'm going to be framing everything around like, I don't want to work with, in my case, like these aggro, like bro-y people who aren't coachable, who aren't open, who aren't curious. Like those are all the things I need them to be. And so I'm trying to always get more clear on the persona and help our clients in 90-day pipeline to get more clear on who's the real person underneath this that you need to be looking for, that's ideal for you as like a collaborative client partner, that you're not just an order taker to them. And it's not just about the offer, right? It's about who you're talking to for the offer.
Yeah, I think folks over-index on demographics and under-index on psychographics.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I think what's also interesting in the example you gave of, client pays late and this kind of thing, the other question to ask is, how did I enable that behavior?
Exactly.
Because what also happens is consultants will, because they need the deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They will bend over backwards in the negotiation and the sales process, and the client says jump, and you say how high, and they say, well, we don't want to do this, and we say it's gone, right? And we'll just right, almost on the fly manipulate proposals to make them fit for the client, and then we're shocked when they walk all over us after the deal signed.
Right. For sure. And all that does is cost you a ton of time in the sales process, a ton of time when you're starting with the client. And I learned this through this one deal that I walked away from too. It was like the world's longest process and most like arduous survey writing process with a client I've ever been in for something that was so low dollar value that it just didn't make any sense. And I feel like, you know, I think, yeah, a lot of consultants, to your point, they almost like they try to make everything about their client's needs, but to a point where they've devalued themselves to the client. And then when the client has payment issues or whatever, they're like, oh, no worries, like whatever. I'm crazy if a client doesn't pay me. And you know what I say to them when we're about to sign the deal? I'm like, these numbers, net 30, they don't mean like a suggestion. Like you won't get any work from me if I don't have the money. And sometimes they look at me like, what? And I'm like, no. And it's actually happened with a strategic partner of mine that there were some payment issues. And I just sent a mass text to everyone involved in the project. And I said, I'm sitting on this report until you guys put money in my account. So let me know. And it was like perceived as very offensive. But I think that like as consultants, like it's our business. It's your business. Like, people are robbing you when they don't pay you. Like it's literally theft, like theft of services. So I wish we would all stand up more, like a lot of consultants would stand up more for their value in the way that they relate to clients.
Well, the tragedy of it is that when you have standards and you uphold those standards, they will respect you more, not less.
Exactly.
Funny example. Well, not so funny, but I had the team booked a call on my calendar with a consultant that wants to enroll a 90-day pipeline. Standard procedure is, so everybody goes, this, but for the sake of the audience, to enroll a 90-day pipeline, you have to ultimately go through me. Like you have to pass go. I have to approve of your application to join the program. And so standard procedure is you have to do some homework before you talk to me. There's some videos to watch about the program and how it works. And this person showed up to the call not having watched the video. And I understand people are busy. Like I wasn't mean about it, but we have to reschedule because we don't have the context for this conversation, and we're going to get more value out of it and get more traction if you've done your homework. And that was fine. And I never heard from him again. Right. And, you could argue, well, Ahmed, like, why are you throwing an opportunity? Could have had the conversation there. Sure. But what am I signing up for if they can't follow simple instructions from the get-go? Right. What kind of client? And I'm not judging this person. It could have been an oversight and a mistake, and maybe they'll make it right. But it's a red flag, right? If you can't follow instructions now, based on how we've set this process up to be in your best interest, then what kind of client are you going to be?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'd rather save myself the trouble.
For sure.
So big takeaway here is standards. That's going to be somewhere on the title of this episode. It is your responsibility as a consultant to set the standard for what kind of clients you want, who you want to work with, how you want to be treated, how you want to do the work, how you want that relationship to function. And if you find yourself working with clients or being dealt with or treated in a way that doesn't meet your standards, it's likely your fault for not setting them first and foremost, and then holding to them and holding other people to them.
Yeah. And just being okay to be just uncomfortable, to hold people to your standards that you've set, and hold yourself to the standards you've set for yourself. It's really, for me, more of a self thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get that for people that struggle with boundaries, which is most of us, this is a bit of a muscle you have to flex, right?
Yeah.
I was at my daughter's hockey practice the other day, and it was like a clinic where there's a bunch of kids, not on her team, but like a bunch of kids in a clinic, and there's a lot of boys there. And so these boys kept butting in front of her in line for the drill. And I, of course, as a dad, I'm losing my mind, right? Like, why are they butting in front of her? So I went over. Whether this is a good idea or not, I don't know, right? I went over and I opened the gate, and I'm like, do not let anybody go in front of you, right? I think she just needed to hear me say that she could, because she's a very polite kid, right?
Yeah.
She needed to hear me say that she could do that, right? But my point is, I get it, right? Like, if you did not uphold boundaries as a child, it's hard to develop this ability as an adult. But it's doable, and it just requires practice. It's like building a muscle, and it's in your best interest.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else, Anna?
No.
Thanks for coming on. Looking forward to the next client that you fire. Can't wait to hear that story.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.